And we are live.
All right.
All right, this is awesome. Okay, well, hello everybody. My name is Valentino Stoll, and I'm joined by, my co-host here, Joe Leo.
Hey, everyone.
And we figured it was high time for somebody to just start talking about Ruby and AI. I
Yeah,
feel like we have
past
like a
time.
lot. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
There's all this Python out there, and lots of people are working with AI with Ruby,
Mhm.
and lots of people are writing about it. But I feel like it could use like a little boost from the community to highlight people right that are working on the stuff and exposing it. We have the lovely Ruby AI meetup in New York City. That's what is it? What is it called now? Augment
Artificial Ruby.
Artificial Ruby.
Yeah,
So
but it's a
hopefully
real
that
meetup.
it's a real meetup. Yeah, it's pretty much like a conference at this point, I think.
Yeah, I know. It's huge. It is. It is like one of the more life-affirming, career-affirming things that have happened to me in the last 5 years. Is showing up to that meetup every month. It's so.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's where we met.
Yeah.
Just fantastic. It's just super. I mean, OpenAI was at the last one, like talking about their Ruby gem,
Right. Right.
right? Like it's like really getting like official, I think, as
Yeah,
like
I think so too. In
yeah,
that, yeah, you're right. Like OpenAI coming and giving that talk to me felt like, okay, this is actually where you go when you're releasing stuff in Ruby.
right. Yeah.
That was a big deal.
So, I'm AI team at Gusto. You've built this incredible AI company, Phoenix. Let's just hash out like, what we're working on and set the stage here because I would love to dive in
Yeah.
kind of more to Phoenix and like how did you even what is it and like, dive in.
Well, we can talk about Phoenix this time as well. I think that next episode, you should just tell us all of the trade secrets going on at Gusto now that you've been there for a few weeks. We'll just ask and answer, and you'll just, violate the terms of your employee agreement and tell us all about it.
I mean, there are some things I could talk about.
I know, I'm
I'm
sure.
happy to talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk Phoenix. This is, I think, an interesting place to start. First, because I know all about it, and I think second, because it is something that is built, and being built every day to serve the Ruby and Ruby on Rails communities. And I don't see a lot of that. I mean, and I understand why. Like from a business perspective, you think that the surface area of your business is going to be much higher if you either serve all languages, like a lot of the AI wrappers out there, or if you tailor your things to JavaScript, which we've seen, or Java, which I've seen on the enterprise. But this is something that I hear at Artificial Ruby, and that I deeply believe. The creative things that are going to come to define the next generation of software development, some, if not most of those, are going to come from the Ruby community. And in order to do that, we've got to give them some good tools. And on top of that, it's just way more fun. It's just way more fun to be doing this in Ruby.
Yeah, I agree. I have definitely had my fair share of Python, and
Yeah.
to be honest, the tooling is there.
Hmm.
You could just run stuff, and I wouldn't say not worry about it, but it is easier, more ergonomic.
Hmm.
And it's getting better in Ruby. The support is coming, so I don't want to put people off saying, saying go use Python. I think we're like kind of at that tipping point where there's enough in Ruby to get the ergonomic feel of a Rubyist style of AI system.
Yeah.
And I feel like, now Rubyists are great at, building everything to suit them, right? Like,
Hmm. Yeah.
I'll never
Absolutely.
forget, I forget on the Ruby Rogues, we had somebody where, they had built their own, like, their own, like, high performance throughput HTTP server. And I was like, well, why would you build
Yeah.
this, with all the other options out there? And it was just like, well, I could.
Right.
And it's like
Yeah.
I know how it works, and it works great for my use case, and and I feel like that's like almost the Rubiest way. It's like
I think
like
so too. Yeah.
you get like these like all the meta programming, and you can like create like kind of your own language out of
Hmm.
Ruby, and that's like the benefit of Ruby, right? Is like if you want to make your own DSL, like honestly, it's very easy. Like
Sure.
make it look
Yeah.
how you want it to read, and it's honestly that easy.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. And I think that was part of our journey in developing Phoenix, because we started last year sometime Q3. And my development team, they're not they're not all Rubyists. They're kind of generalist engineers. I run a company that does a lot of services, software engineering services. Teams got to be able to hack in multiple languages. And so, okay, so they're looking at the tool set and saying, yeah, it's mostly Python. Like if you want to, if you want to start to integrate with the APIs, like the LLM APIs and LangChain at the time that we wanted to work with it, you needed to use Python. Or the other option was like, okay, well, there are these ports from Python tools to Ruby tools, which I think is, a similar story to the HTTP server, right? And it's like, okay, well, that's good, but I also know, we've been in this Ruby community for a long time. Like some people do, it just has to be Ruby, and so
Right.
we want to know, like, okay, well, is it a tool that's actually like serving a purpose and and well maintained, or is it just a guy alone somewhere saying, you know what, I refuse to code in Python, so I will rewrite everything in Ruby before I even do anything. And so in the beginning, we did a lot of Python. And today, the application is much more Ruby and Ruby on Rails. And what we learned, courtesy of Scott Werner, among a number of other people, is that okay, now there are starting to be some tools that are built from scratch from Ruby. They're not built, they're not porting anything. They're doing something net new. In that case,
Right.
agentic architecting and orchestration, and they've got a life of their own. And that, I think, as you've mentioned, is kind of a tipping point. It's like, oh, okay, this is where we're headed next.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I feel like at the last Ruby Kaigi, Matt's even said it best. Like, the language of Ruby is like almost built for LLMs, right? Like,
Yeah,
the way that it reads is like so much like a sentence that like,
yeah,
you know, you can almost just like write a Ruby program so that it is sentences,
yeah,
and
right.
maybe get
I
like
know.
some more, more advantages out of there, like markdown to Ruby.
I think that's entirely possible.
Yeah.
Somebody mentioned that they thought that Ruby was, and I'm kind of curious on your take about this, that Ruby was not well suited for, I guess, well suited for the kind of uh, code generation that happens today with LLMs and a chatbot, which I've got some opinions on we can get into. But like that style of development today is like Ruby's not a good candidate for that because it's dynamically interpreted, it's strongly typed, and this person's contention was like, look, TypeScript, Python, and then the Java.NET kind of suite are going to be the languages that continue to prosper because LLMs can easily spit out code based on them. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
I mean, there are ways around that. I honestly agree.
Mm-hmm.
Currently, I have this project I'm like kind of working on the side to like fine tune an LLM specifically for Ruby code generation because of this
Yeah.
reason. And it's challenging. Like I will say, and the biggest issue is like these bigger models. They're good, right? Like they're
Mm-hmm.
honestly good enough at Ruby today that like if you're using like I don't know Cursor or even Anthropic code is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
They can generate like if you want to just spin up a Rails app and work on features like Claude Code is great. Like
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah.
like expensive. Right? I heard actually the author of Anthropic's Claude Code. They had him on Latent Space
Mm-hmm.
podcast, and he was basically saying, listen, like it may seem like $50 a day or $100 a day may be expensive, but like you have to think about like what it enables the developer to do, right? Like developers are expensive on their own, and if you can enable them to get even like a 50% boost in productivity, like that's very valuable, right?
Yeah.
Because their output is even more so than these code generation aspects of things, right? So like it'll be interesting to see, like yes, it's expensive, and so like the free models are honestly not great for Ruby code generation, right? And so like
Yeah.
if you wanted to run something on your laptop, right? Like currently, yes, Ruby is not like ideal for code generation in the same ways, right?
Yeah.
But, like it is the tipping point, right? Like it's not like so bad that it's like preventative, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you can still, even if you don't know Ruby, you can still use these free models, right, to learn Ruby. Like it'll
Yeah.
still
Absolutely.
generate
Yeah.
enough code, enough quality too, where like it's not going to send you down necessarily the wrong pathway, Although that is still an issue, right? Like, I'm curious what your thoughts are there, like, because I know, like, it's almost like I feel like it's like relearning how to use a computer, right? Like we're almost like relearning to like how to use a computer, how to program, like how to do all these things, because like there are ways of like kind of massaging the the chats or experience of building software with these new things that we're kind of
Yeah,
still like readjusting to, right? And
I
I know
totally agree.
I've had issues like and maybe that I'm like a little bit out there because like I have a very specific, I've read a lot of software books, so like my thinking process is around what I've read and what I've experienced
Mhm.
and like all the things that I've made, and so I'm like biased, right, to
Yeah,
like whatever it's generating. So like I have a harder time like assisting the path for the LLM to travel down rather than it just like taking its own path. So like there
yeah,
are like these kind of like two, I feel like, buckets where like, well, do you want to just like produce something or do you want to produce something very specific? And I feel like
yeah,
if
or
you
in a very
want,
specific way.
right, if you want something very specific, it's like much harder to get that than just like making something happen, right?
Yeah. I did just a couple of weeks ago at a bird conference, and and what I talked about was the cognitive burden placed on development teams because of generative AI, and it's interesting that that they said on latent space, hey, even if it's a 50% increase, that's really worth the money. And I don't disagree with that, but it's right in line with one of the stats that I pulled, which was a Microsoft study. Uh, or of course, owns GitHub, you can measure pull requests and all these different things. And they said that, yeah, they're seeing a 55.8% increase in what they're calling productivity, which is really just code generation and pull requests and acceptance. Accenture did a separate study, which is interesting, and they were measuring code compilation. And so, okay, that leaves Ruby out, but for a lot of applications, it's like, okay, well, the amount of times that you're compiling code means that you are testing it more, you're releasing it for some definition in production. So, what I was trying to hammer home in the talk was if you are looking like if every single day you simply have code, or Windsurf clone or cursor, you have this thing now code, and you are reading it, you're messing with it, you're putting it into, you're committing it. It's going to be 50% more code than you've ever seen in your whole life, and then you do it every single day. And the decisions that come up from that are, I think, fascinating because just like you said, you've got a really specific idea of where you want the code to go. I do too. But that means that you and I are going to do it a little bit slower than the next person. And I'm not sure, like maybe we're really confident. You seem like a confident guy. I think I am too. That, hey, I'm doing it my way and it's going to work.
Right.
Right. But the next person next to me might be moving a little faster. And if I was a mid level engineer, I might be like, well, I don't know. I mean, these people around me seem like they're going pretty quick and I'm not going so quick. Maybe it's okay, this thing is doing what I expect and spin it up locally and spin it up at a dev server, whatever, working, maybe it's okay to do this. That's the big room I was there. Was the computer has looked at a pull request they're supposed to review and immediately saw that it was AI generated. And every hand went up. And I mean, me too, and I work with some really smart people, but I can tell when I look at it, I'm like, oh, this was generated by AI, right? Like some of this is, straight from the code generator.
Right.
And I'm not saying a good or bad thing about that, right? Because if they're not a good developer, maybe you're happy that it's generated by AI.
I'm curious there. Like, what are your tells that it is code like generated from an LLM? Like, are there very specific examples, or is it like kind of just like a gut feeling?
Well, I mean, one thing is there's a bunch of comments in the code you can tell, I can tell right away because
Yeah.
they're always trying to put in a bunch of comments. It always drove me nuts to begin with. Beyond that, I think what you end up seeing, I mean, so it depends, right? Uh, there can be really insane things if really people don't know what they're doing. Like you see, like when AI is sitting on top of an application that already is not really making sense, it will do insane things. Like we saw once we were doing a consulting gig, we saw a commit come through that had a try catch block where the catch was like rescuing from a certain error and then modifying the database record um, to account for the fact that whatever it was looking for was not there. And so it's like like generating a migration, right? Because it hit an exception. So there could be some crazy stuff, but generally speaking, I
Jeez.
think there's a certain amount of verbosity, I think, and there's a certain amount of editing in sort of more files than maybe is necessary, and you start to see like, oh, I think this is AI at work here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned comments. It's kind of funny because like there's so many tokens wasted on comments, especially when it's like a descriptive comment for a very self-explanatory line,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
just one, right? Like,
right.
oh, we're gonna update the blah 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 table, and like it's like table like update.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, right. Yeah, when that happens, and I'll call it out, but I'm always just like, it's a weird thing. It's like, well, I'm going to call this out and have this person change it, but I know they didn't really write it.
Right.
So it's not a comment about them, but it's kind of more about their vigilance in accepting code and not in how they're writing it, because I don't think they would write that,
Right.
which is a kind of funny thing. And so you make these different decisions that, as you already said, we're kind of still grappling with how that works on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, it makes me think. I'm thinking about your latest like Phoenix post on like reactive AI, right? Like
Mhm.
where uh, I feel like we're kind of at the cornerstone of like truly implementing, AI actions as like a reactive component to various things in the
Yes,
day, right? And to the
yes.
development process. Right now, it's like very like you know instructional, where you're like
Hmm.
directing it, trying to do something. And there are more and more things where it's like, oh, like GitHub actions that run on something, right?
Yeah.
But they're not like, it's still kind of like, oh, it's going to be a GitHub action and it'll create a pull request. And then you're like,
Mhm.
you still have to, get in front of it and like do
Yeah.
something with that, right? And like,
Yeah.
well, it's going to produce way faster than you can review it, right?
Oh
Like,
yeah, absolutely. In fact, that our first customer, Phoenix's first customer, got exactly that. We're like, because we're thinking like everybody else was, like, hey, this thing can do a task. In this case, generate some tests and open a pull request for their repository. Well, you're right; it can open 1,000 pull requests, which nobody wants. But even if it doesn't, it's kind of like this interloper that just
right,
gives you a thing. It's like, oh, hey, these tests work. It's like, well, yeah, but now I got to stop what I'm doing and look at it. And it's like having another member of the team, like Dependabot, it's a little slower, and it didn't fail. The customer liked it, but we could see by how fast PRs were getting accepted, this was not the way. And I've come kind of full circle around that. And I like, your term for reactive actions is exactly right. First generation AI, the cursors, clients, bolts, the levels of the world. These are great tools. I mean, we use some of these tools. We use Bolt to create Phoenix.love. I'm not saying anything bad about them, but I'm saying this is first generation. You have a chat. You have a chat with a thing. You tell it what to do. You give it some instructions. It does it, anywhere between halfway good and 80% good, and then you have it go back again. I think that is I think those are not actually very long for the world. I could be wrong. But what we aimed to do was take that out. Phoenix doesn't have a chat interface. It already has its commands. Its commands are to like lovingly support your code base with tests, with bug reports, with suggestions or highlighting of risks, and to do this in an automated fashion. Right? It's going to spin up immediately, generate a full suite of tests, and that's going to follow you as your software evolves.
that's
And
awesome,
there's nothing stopping us from doing that, right?
right?
What it does take is a serious amount of automation and sort of well crafted, well designed integration between a bunch of different endpoints. So that we can do.
That's funny you mention Dependabot, because that's kind of like how I imagine all these things to start, right? Like it's just
Yeah.
like annoying you with like a barrage of like updates.
Right.
Hey, this thing is like out of date, and it's like,
Yeah.
well, like merge it then. Like I don't know, like
Yeah.
I
Right.
don't have a test
Right.
though, so like don't, right? Like
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Exactly.
you end up like trying to configure it just right, and you spend all this time doing that, and then you finally get it right, and it's like you still end up with a pull request that hangs
Yeah.
because you still got to test it, and like that takes
Yeah.
time manually, right? Like verifying that things work, and like
And it's a
some
bummer when
side
it comes
project.
through, right? I
Yeah,
just got we use Kamal to deploy part of our application. I think Kamal is cool, And I just got a dependabot update. It's like, oh, hey, it's a minor point release bug. And I'm like, oh, because the test is manual. I have to actually deploy it a bunch of times and make sure it works. And
It's
of course, it's good software, but I'm like, oh, this is like another thing in my day.
I will say I have a little side project called nowreading.dev. It keeps track of my reading list so that I could just throw stuff at it. And like I use Kamal too, and I was like, oh, bundle update, minor, right? Like
Hmm.
that should be safe. And I go and try and Kamal deploy, and it's like, oh, Postgres fails because you can't like restart update now or something like that. Like
Yeah,
it was like a small like configuration option that like no longer is there in a minor version update, right? And like, oh, if I
right.
had this autopilot, like I just couldn't deploy then,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like,
right. Yeah,
especially
we're
if I
all
had
just like
deploys
it.
automated, like it would just be alerted, right? Like,
Yeah, right. Yeah, we're all just living in this like we live in this incredible amount of trust, but like interdependent trust with semantic versioning, where
yeah,
we could just say, okay, the minor version is going to work because for most people it is, but it's not going to work for you, and then you're screwed. I know.
yeah, and all this computer use stuff, like that seems a little more promising. At least it could like spot check things for you and be like,
Hmm.
hey, like I tried to deploy this thing and I see like, oh, your homepage doesn't load, right? Like,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's nice.
that might get handy, but like, I feel like it's still not quite there. I don't know.
No, I think
I'm
you're right,
curious.
but I think that it's coming. It's
I feel
there's
like we're stuck in this place where we just want it now, and like it's not there, but people use it like it's now, right? Like,
Yeah, it's true. But I have to say I'm a little disappointed in the software community writ large because I feel like most of us are not thinking beyond what like lay people are thinking about AI. It was what 3 years ago now that ChatGPT kind of like took over the world, and OpenAI. The first thing they said was like, "Hey, this is just like one use case. This is not the thing. The chatbot is not the thing."
right,
But it's 3 years
right.
later, and we're all still treating it like, "Oh, well, if you got a chatbot and will vibe code you to a landing page, we got to give you like $25 million." Um, and I think that's fine for the my I think for us, we should hold ourselves to a little bit of a higher standard.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you there. I've been trying to escape the chatbot as a input
Yeah.
as like the definitive user experience because it's so easy. To be honest, if you have a software product like a chat makes complete sense if you were just like trying to service somebody that wants something solved from you, right? Like, yeah, just throw them in a chat and like chat ops, which is funny. Like chat ops didn't work before, but now that AI has
Yeah. Right.
like conglomerated the idea of it, it's like now back and like everybody's like, oh yeah, chat ops. Like, it's
Right.
like,
Right. Yeah.
oh, like what didn't work about it before? And we're like relearning that aspect of things, but yeah, I'm definitely like I'm liking this more of like reactive approach of seeing like, okay, where can you just like throw an LLM at just like observing something and like start there and see like what it observes. And like from past experience, like it's both good and bad, right? Like it's like a whole new learning experience where like if you're trying to like categorize what it's doing, like it's honestly not that great at that. Like it can be good, but it'll just make stuff up. And like if you have very specific things you're trying to like have it like bucket, it'll just like it'll get it like 80% of the time. And then like,
Yeah.
well, what do you
Right.
do with the other 20% of the buckets that are just like, what
Yeah.
is that?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And then you're going back through it manually.
Right. But I feel like there's more and more like observational stuff. So I'm curious, like, uh, where do you see kind of like the observations heading to the point where, and like, where's the point where we can actually start acting on those observations, right? Like, how does somebody even know, like, okay, this is better way than chat bot, right?
Oh, I see what you're saying. I mean, what I see is, just stepping back to the business perspective, like you have to be able to demonstrate a lot of value to people. And, the way that generative AI through chat demonstrates value is it spits out a lot of code. And in the case of Bolt, see, Bolt is this fascinating example because Bolt is not really Bolt. Bolt is StackBlitz. StackBlitz has been around for 10 years. And Eric Simon built StackBlitz to develop a tool that is production grade development environment in the browser. And they were working on it for 10 years and doing okay. They're selling it to enterprise, but certainly not blowing anybody's doors in. And they got this idea to wrap it around a chatbot. And the result was magical, not because they did something to a site, an LLM, but because they already had this infrastructure that could bring life. And that is a really cool experience. So people see that and they're like, that's the value I want. And I think that we're all just human beings at the end of the day, and we want to have that experience of like that thing. All of a sudden I had something that I didn't have before. Right. And for us, it's funny because we're these totally test driven engineers. We write tests for everything. But we know that, first of all, that's not the world. And second of all, there are limitations to what we can do. We can't possibly think of every edge case. We can't possibly test everything because that's why bugs creep into our system and we get things wrong. So what we want to be able to deliver is I feel the safety, right? Like within a week or maybe even sooner than that, not only do I have these tools, but these tests, but this software has alerted me to issues that would have been in production and are now not. I think that's something where we can say, oh, okay, like I can breathe a sigh of relief. I have the safety net that's here.
Yeah, I will say there's an incredible amount of value for what you've built at Phoenix, and I say that because having personally tried to do TDD with all these varying code editing tools, uh,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
like even Cursor, Claude Code, like OpenAI's, they'll help. They'll get tests created, but it's like you start looking and it's like everything's mocked. Like
Yeah. Oh,
nothing's
yeah.
real, and so
Yeah.
like, well, it's just testing mocks. Like, yeah, I could do that. Like, I could get anything to pass, like,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and so
And
like,
it'll like hallucinate factories. It'll do some
right.
really crazy stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can have it, and it'll get on a loop and like eventually fix itself, but like only to a certain extent. And
Yeah.
sometimes it gets into a loop, and you've just wasted hours of it trying to like recreate a database helper or like something like
Yeah.
that, right? And
Yeah.
like you're like, well, we already had one of those.
Yeah. Right.
The
I
context got too big,
yes.
and now like you've forgotten about like all the stuff that exists.
Well, that's an interesting point with one of the reasons that I think that the LLMs stumble on some of the tasks we give it is because the context when like they are loading on too much context. Friend of the show, Landon Gray, had a post about this not too long ago where he was like, if you're focused on the size of the context window, you're focused on the wrong thing. And I think he's absolutely right because it is all about the specific context you give it. And it's still today the best use of AI when you're generating code. And I'm sure you've already experienced this is to ask it to do very small, very specific things, or else it's going to
Right.
do something. Or else it's going to make a bunch of assumptions and do something you don't want. And so, loading in the proper context is not easy. And even when I'm like, look at this file, then look at this file, and then do this. It doesn't do it. And that's using GPT-4.1. It's using the latest and greatest, and it is better, but it's still not there.
Right. Yeah, I've been experimenting a little bit with sublayer amongst other things of trying to, because like you make a good point of like, the context window being an issue, but also not being the right focus area, right? Like,
Yeah,
it's almost like we're trying to teach it how we want to do things and how we do things, and
yeah,
the source code isn't necessarily right the only source of that. It's also like our brains and like
yeah,
our utility and like how we do things, right? And so like every person's unique, and that's like an unfortunate thing, but it's also like you it all the LMs, because they're not like the same thing every time, right? Like
yeah,
that's a positive for that.
yeah,
Huge hole I see missing is kind of like that learnability aspect of things, right? Like something that you could just attach on to your experience that just like
yeah,
is watching you and your behavior with it, right? Like, and it can inject like, that behavior into the context as you're
yeah,
using it.
yeah,
And like, that's hard to do, right? Like,
yeah. It's hard,
and,
and it's hard to
and so
even do
I,
once, let alone persistent, right? And
right.
so that's
And so I've been messing around with like some sublayer like actions, right? Because they can watch files, and I feel like this is actually something I've built so many times. Is just like a log, right? Like
Yeah.
what has been done,
Yeah. Right.
just to keep track of the log. I haven't actually used it, right? Like I don't know what to do with it now that I have it, but like I keep building them and like eventually be like, if I could just like find how to like introduce this into however I'm using it, like there's value there, but like I don't know if that's the right way to do it, right? Like, but like I feel like there's something there where it's like, okay, like your use of it is gonna like train it somehow at some point.
Yeah.
Do you think I'm
I,
off there?
no, I'm actually really interested to see this now because I think that I do think there's something there. And I think, we've had this, yeah, I mean, I guess I haven't heard it this year, but, last year people were always talking about training LLMs. And, to a large extent, that was confusion.
Maybe we're just using like too dangerous of a word training, right? Like that's very
Yeah,
specific
right.
to this
Yeah, yeah.
world, right? Like it's almost
Yeah,
like not like we're training necessarily, but like providing some, backdrop to the
yeah,
experience, right? Like
yeah.
AIs are becoming like we've made these chatbots and it's like now, okay, well they're all the same chatbots, and
Hmm.
now people are trying to like augment the context to like change the experience, but really we're like at that experience, right? Like and like how do we rework it to like change the experience to a more personal level? And like I don't know, there's like that's it's really really interesting to me.
Yeah, it is. And it's also, what we've found is, when we try to, you try to bolt things on to the LLM, right? Either additional context or additional instructions. And the thing is that these LLMs are changing really fast because that's where most of the money is going. And we found that you really have to keep a lot of loose coupling. Like you really have to structure your code in such a way that the things that you're building around, like especially in the blast radius of your LLM, that stuff has to be able to just be, deprecated completely or changed out really fast. We were on our second agent orchestration library, and I'm pretty sure my team's going to tell me. And it's just, these things outlive their usefulness really quickly. And so you got to be able to move and change really quickly too.
Yeah, I feel like that's not unlike all software, right? Like
Yeah,
you
for
know a
sure.
lot a lot of people even hit those limits with Rails, right? Like Rails is a great like kickoff utility like
Hmm.
framework. Like you have something on the web that you want to accomplish, and like Rails is awesome for that, right? Like and you
Hmm.
can build an incredible business out of that. And like at some point you may see yourself being like, well, Rails has out our like business processes have like outgrown what Rails had offered us originally, right? And so like people do like find something else even within the Ruby space too, right? Like
Hmm.
just building something themselves that fits the business better. Stripe is a famous like example of this, right? Where like they are probably one of the biggest Ruby shops that's not Rails, right? Like
Yeah, right.
and like I feel like that's a similar thing with all these like AI frameworks or things that happen is like people are now like outgrowing them to the custom point, right? Where like we now have custom AI like software that we're like focused on how do we build that best, and like that's always going to change, right? In the same way that like software frameworks and usage changes too. I'm curious if like that normalizes in the same way though, right? Like we're at such like a hockey stick like in the graph of advancement, right? Like seeing all these like coding agents and stuff like that that are like coming out, like how do you gauge like all right, this makes sense to pursue and this doesn't because we know like it's probably not going to be worth it, right? Like it's going to be gone like in a month,
There you go.
right?
I spent a little while on the sideline, and I think my personal opinion is just jump in and start building and start, to sort of take advantage of the new tools as they come out. Because just like anything else, if you don't know how, the next big thing is, unless you already have working knowledge of everything before. So that's been my take: is get our team, just deep in the weeds of AI, specifically AI automation. And I think, like anything else, you can build test cases and repeatedly test kind of the use cases that are important to you with different LLMs, different prompting, whatever. And be ready to shift and shift quickly. But I think one thing is that, you really have to build in a way that can take advantage of what's there without sort of obfuscating what's there. And that's, I think, another big advantage for the huge, AI generation tools that are out there right now, because it's just a thin wrap. So you kind of don't need to, and some companies are doing some really cool innovation, but you kind of can let the LLM lead the way. That's we're still kind of keeping that as a core concept because again, it's where billions of dollars is going. So it would be
Right.
foolish to just say, well, we're going to build separately from that. We want to build with it, but make sure that we're always able to take advantage of those innovations.
Yeah, I agree with you there. It's you definitely have to chase it, which is kind of exciting
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
in the industry, right? Like you got to see what works for you and what doesn't because yeah, you never know what could stick for you. And so I'm curious like I'd like to transition us into like the Ruby space specifically for like all this tooling, right? Like cuz there's a lot of talk like, you know, LangChain has like their whole stack that just like is kind of like the Rails for AI has
Mhm.
been for a while, like where you just go and like build stuff, and it locks you into that LangChain experience, and like people outgrow in the same way Rails do.
Yeah. Yeah,
What
we
what is
did.
what are like some of the Rails equivalents that you see that are kind of like setting in for some of this? Like, hey, if you want to build with AI stuff, like this is a great starting point.
That's a good question. Well, the easiest way to be wrong on a tech podcast is to tell you what the next Rails is going to be. But
There are no
but
right answers on this show. Are you kidding?
oh, good. Yeah. Yeah. I'd say that, I like Scott's sublayer a lot. I would love it if that was the next library that we move to. I know it's a bigger shift because right now we've used Crew AI for about 3 or 4 months now, which is open source. I think they have like a premium tier that is more full service, but we haven't used it. But you start to see some of the cracks in these tools, and it's just because I guess I'd like to think that most people aren't using them as an extensive a use case as we have. Now, there are some and some that are far more complex, but I'd say that we're probably on the 80 to 90%, more complex use cases. When it came to LangChain, we still use LangChain to evaluate and like find out how much we're spending every day, which is alarming. But we don't use the orchestration anymore because we think it became very difficult to set up. It wasn't really fitting. Like again, like you said, it wasn't really fitting our use case. I would like to move ourselves to sublayer. Scott said he would come and port it over for free. So when he does that, we'll move for sure. And I guess I'm not sure beyond that, like what the next big thing will be. What do you think?
Yeah, I've definitely used Sublayer, obviously heavily.
Hmm.
I don't know if that's just because that's what first came out or not, but it does solve most of the use cases I've seen for building with AI in a very Rubyist way. Maybe if I was new to Ruby, there would be other things that might be better because I don't have to know as much Ruby. I don't know.
Mm, yeah,
I don't know if that's the same use case for LangChain though, right? I feel like many people maybe don't know LangChain either or Python,
yeah, right.
going into it. So, um, yeah, it's hard to say. I feel like, Shopify just announced their Roast framework, which looks pretty promising as like a similar command line workflow orchestration system. I feel like there's still like a lot of like people missing the boat on like benchmarking and evaluation of like what it's doing. And
Yeah,
for that reason, I'm very hesitant with any of them.
I see. You mean the tools themselves are not benchmarked?
Right. The tools themselves, like, I feel like if you want to build like a quality AI system, like evaluating what it's doing is like one of the highest priorities, right? Like, if you're not testing it in a like an automated fashion, at least some way, and like scoring and judging it and having that feedback loop, it's very difficult to like get any like long-standing quality use out of it from a business
What's a score
perspective.
that you're looking for?
That's up to you to make, right? Like, but like having tooling in place to like make those up are kind of like really important. So like, there's lots of vendors that offer this service as like a sideways product, and then it always creates this issue of well, then you have all these tools that then have to connect to it, right? And so like you're then dumping all of your logs at right these services, and then having to like massage that workflow, right?
Yeah.
And like, so
Yeah.
how do you then get the feedback mechanisms, right, from your app into those? And then it becomes this whole like massive
Yeah.
orchestration where you're trying to like just work with vendors all the time
Yeah.
to solve something that should be built into the tools, to be honest. And I feel like it's often like missed as like a framework. It should almost be like the first choice, right? Like, here is the evaluation system or metrics builder for an AI framework. And then starting from there, then all of the features start getting built into that. And I feel
Mm.
like Sublayer provides all the tooling to make that happen. It's just not like automatically there, right? Like
Yeah.
you kind of have to like make your own system out of it, which isn't bad. It's just like more modular and more like, you have to do it. You have to
Right. It's
handle.
more of an investment. Yeah.
Right, which isn't, for Rubius it's actually nice because we like to build things ourselves and of
Right.
our own, right? Like, so like it's like, I'm split, right? Like, because I would like to have these things just automatically work for me
Yeah.
and like defined, to be honest. Like Rails is very like opinionated. I would like an
Hmm.
opinionated, like, this is how you do it.
Yeah. I can see. Yeah. I could
But having the
really help.
flexibility is also important in an AI framework, right? So the active agents library by Justin Bone is like super
Yeah.
promising too, right? Like it's built into the Rails ecosystem. So like you get all of the familiarity and it's like plug and play, and like that the aspects feel like testability is something that you could just use Rails for, right? And be like, okay, I expected to do this thing. I feel like though with a lot of these like agentic stuff that's coming out, it's like, well, how do you like then do the integration test, right? Like there's so many
Yeah.
variables in that workflow. Like it's not like you just like input to output. It's like
Right. Yeah.
input,
I'm thinking about VCR trying to,
yeah, right? Like input
spin
and
up
then
an
side
integration test.
effects and
Yeah.
then right, like, well,
Yeah.
how are you measuring those side effects, right? Like, and like that's very challenging. And I feel like even some of these evaluation vendors like have a hard time capturing that, right? Like how do you measure the side effects within your business processes, especially as you start to hook everything up to it?
Yeah, I know. I think, the active agents one is something that's exciting to me too. And we'll have to have them on the show to the
Totally.
active agent folks. I would like to try it. It's like the Rails part of our application is still a little bit distant from the agents, but it's getting kind of closer and closer every day. So it could be an exciting way to, kick the tires.
Yeah, I would say next to those, like, Obi Fernandez, he's killing it. Like the whole Ray framework is awesome.
Hmm.
I've used that like just I really like the descriptive. It has its own DSL, so like I really like the descriptive nature of like the objects that you build with it as like a, okay, this thing has a bunch of steps in it even that you can hook
Yeah.
up to each other, and like you declare the prompts very specifically within the class structure. Yeah, there's a lot of parts of it that like really snap in play too.
Well, so tell me a little bit about it because I don't know the Ray.
Yeah, so the Ray library, RAIX, it's very declarative in like, okay, you're gonna have, let's say you're generating like you're parsing an invoice, right? And you want to do something with that invoice. Like you make like some kind of like, invoice, prompt
Hmm.
and declare it as like a class, and it's like actionable, and you can say, okay, like it's going to do this prompt and then it's going to use the output from that to do this one, and so you could chain a bunch of stuff together, which is nice. And it has like a lot of the niceties where you can like attach arguments to the prompt and declare that in, and like declare your tools that it can use, and
Yeah.
so you can abstract kind of like an agent aspect. I don't know, I don't think it's actually called an agent, but like
Yeah.
you can create these objects, kind of like just regular Ruby objects, that have these attributes that can be reactive based on what the input is.
Okay.
And it's really nice like utility to work through. And I like the ergonomics of like, it almost has these like then steps. So like after it has a response, then you can do something like that. Yeah, and the
Hmm.
chainability aspect. Yeah, I really like it's like active record style, like where you can chain a bunch of methods off of the same thing and use them
That's
together.
cool. I'm going to check that out.
Yeah. But again, like I'm just experimenting. Like I haven't built a product on it, so like I don't know, long term how that pans out. But Obi's building quite a lot, so like
Yeah.
I trust the framework survives, especially as Shopify starts to embrace it, which they have. So that's
They
pretty
have,
exciting.
yeah. Yeah, I had a talk with Obi and a couple of the other guys at Shopify not too long ago. We were just kind of comparing notes on, how, structuring our programs and structuring the applications. And it's so funny because they're just like, we've said, well, we have had different experiences with Claude versus at that time, I think probably ChatGPT 4.0. And, one of them at Shopify was like, yeah, we've got, we're talking to Claude and ChatGPT about like what they're doing for Ruby. I'm like, oh, that sounds nice. So they're not taking my phone calls. Yeah. But if you're the biggest Rails application in the world, you can get them on the phone and maybe. So I'm like, yeah, advocate for us, please.
It's awesome. Yeah, I'm excited to see what comes out of Andrew Kane this year.
Yeah.
He's just like keeps pumping stuff out for the Ruby world, specifically the stuff that I follow for fine tuning. I keep waiting for the day where I could just like switch over a bunch of stuff I'm doing.
Yeah, to his. I know.
Just use Ruby. Right now, I have these stupid like Python scripts that I'm calling shelling out to basically,
Right.
which is not fun. But work with what you got.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm curious, like, because you mentioned, you were using Python for some things. Like, is that still the case? Like, how is that transition working or integrating with Ruby? Like, what are the challenges you have left there?
Well, so basically, this was a Python app for about the first 3 months until I was kind of like they were deep in the weeds. They're working on giving proper context, on getting the proper automations in place, just for the agent. And right at that point, it was just a CLI. And I think at some point, yeah, we realized, hey, we're gonna need an app, web app that shows what we're doing. And so like over a weekend, I was like, all right, we're Rails 8, like let's go. Uh,
Yeah,
it spun something up, and the whole point was like, hey, this is just a shell. This just shows what the LLM does. And so it was Ruby, but it was a Ruby application, but really it was just Ruby. It was just the showcase point. And then it started to become like, oh, actually, yeah, we're moving away from anything like any kind of interaction on the command line. Like we want to have this thing working end to end and continuously working. And so then that continuous part became, well, it's Rails to GitHub and possibly GitHub Actions, and there's some Docker in there, and then there's the CLI at the other end.
yeah,
And this just and like when we saw that, and we can get into this on the next episode. Like we did a lot of things that probably a few years ago would have been considered big upfront design, and today because AI just like spits out like ERDs and like mermaid charts in like two
yeah.
seconds, it's like now like, oh, we've got like really established stuff and it doesn't matter if it changes. So then
It's
like
my
when we started, we
go-to for
looked at this
Mermaid.
thing. Is it? Yeah, mermaid's
Oh
good.
yeah, I mean, because you
Yeah.
even making changes, you just be like, oh, move this node over here, like, and it just does it
Yeah,
like
it's
perfect. Like,
fascinating. I like the
yeah,
first time I saw it, I was like, what did you do? You spent like a week doing this? And then, I was like, no, it took like 5 minutes. I'm like, all right, awesome. Let's keep doing it then. But yeah, so like when we realized that, it was like, oh, actually, there's like all of these moving pieces, and we don't want to write a bunch of Python to manage that, right? So it became then all of a sudden that little, UI application became like a focal point for the. I'm trying to use a word other than orchestration. The managing the integration points across everything, and
yeah.
and so now the CLI is still really important, and that's written in Python, but it's becoming a smaller and smaller part of the application, not because we're making it smaller, but because the rest of the application is growing it.
Yeah, that's exciting to hear. It makes me wonder because like Crew AI has a heavy Rails for something. I will have to have them on to find out what that is. But
Yeah.
I'm curious like how the lines start to blend, right? Because I feel like every company is like, especially that got in early. Python had to be at the forefront, right?
Yeah.
To
Yeah,
make a lot of
exactly.
progress. But now, yeah, now that it's stabilizing, like Python's not great for web.
Yeah, I know. It's
There's a
not
lot of
great for
missing
web.
pieces. Even the Django, like it's funny. I'm friends with a lot of Django folks, and they're like, they try and look to Rails, like, oh, how can we like integrate that? It's like every day, like, how
Yeah.
do you do this in Rail, like in Python, but from Rails?
Yeah, I know. I've experienced that too. And it does get really complicated. Yeah, I would never start. a web application. And, like I've built web applications in C sharp. It's kind of annoying. I've done it in Java. It's fine, but yeah, Ruby still feels like the best. It's hands down, and the web's not going anywhere. I don't think anytime soon. So we're going to keep building for the web.
Yeah, totally. Well, I think we're hitting our limit here on time. Otherwise, we're
Okay,
gonna keep talking all day long.
I know,
To be
I know.
honest.
This was good though.
Yeah, I mean, if you're out there listening, we have a lot lined up here. We're gonna start having on guests every week if we can. We're gonna explore the depths of everything that's happening in the AI community, and try and focus on Ruby as much as we can.
Yeah.
As things progress, a lot happening, and it should be exposed and find out more about how people are using it, because like everybody's using it a little bit different, and I'm always kind of impressed anytime I see somebody talking about what they're working on. I'm like, whoa, like I
Yeah,
didn't know
I
you could
know.
do that, and like we got to get more of that.
We got to get more of that, and we have to make it less shocking when we hear about a new cool thing, right? Like,
Right.
you
Right.
come here and you're on the ground floor, and then and then everybody knows, right?
Right.
We can all be on the
Exactly.
same page. Yeah.
Yep. Totally. All right, Joe. It was great talking to you today.
Yeah, you
I
too.
feel like maybe we should close out, just like sharing one thing that we found interesting recently, in the AI space that you're pretty excited about. Uh,
All right, you said you first.
I can go first. I've been messing around with code agents. Specifically, Hugging Face has this thing called small agents.
Hmm.
And there is a deep learning course on building these code agents with their Hugging Face small agents. Super cool. It is in Python, but it like really eye-opening kind of what you can do when you empower an LLM with its own like ability to code and make use of coding in general. And so I highly recommend checking this out. It's on deep learning, one of Andrew Ng's courses, building with code agents with Hugging Face small agents.
Very cool. I actually, I wanted to get that. I wanted to highlight again that Ruby OpenAI official project. I'm having trouble finding it because I loved the woman who presented was like a no nonsense Rubyist. And now I'm trying to find what it is. Give me a moment here. There we are. Yeah, so I liked the OpenAI Ruby. It's OpenAI/OpenAI dash Ruby. It's good software. It makes a lot of use of sorbet, which is a little contentious around def methods. But, in a real way, it tries to give you some static typing or some benefits of static typing. It's insanely fast. It's a really good place to start if you're trying, like most people, you're just starting out. You're trying to integrate with AI in an interesting way that's not through just a chat. This is a great place to start.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm happy to see that come up too.
Yeah.
Well, this has been really great, Joe. We got to do more and more of this.
Yeah, V.
We're
We'll
branding
be back.
ourselves the Ruby AI podcast. We'll see how that sticks. I feel like we're in for a lot of fun times ahead of us. I know you'll be at RailsConf coming up here
I will be at
not too long.
RailsConf.
I will also be there.
Awesome.
So if you're out there listening, come and see us. We'd love to talk about AI and Ruby. And who knows? Maybe we'll have a show. I don't want to. You're speaking, so I don't want to like put any pressure on you.
Also do a show? I think it'd be
But
fun.
we could, right? I
Yeah.
feel like that could be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, stay tuned, and we'll be releasing more and more.
Yeah. Stay tuned.
All
All
right.
right. Thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you soon.